Welcome, welcome, guys. We are back for another episode of The Lock-In. I am joined by my good friend and my future Gold Coast roommate, Dara O'Kearney. Dara, welcome.
Well, thank you, David. Yeah, I'm looking forward to spending at least 2 weeks with you in a small room in the Gold Coast. What could possibly go wrong?
It's never gone wrong before, so fingers crossed,
Nope.
fingers crossed. So, Dara, we've no guest this week. It's a little like our first two ever episodes. This episode is going to be half from here in our respective offices / box rooms, in my case, and half from our hotel room in Las Vegas. In fact, we are recording this half literally hours before we travel. You're flying to Dublin. From Dublin to London Heathrow, and I'm flying from Malta to London, and we're meeting there, and then we're going to fly together to Las Vegas. I just want to, in case anyone doesn't believe me here, I'm just going to prove it. Here, look, there's my suitcase. Look, I'm packing my bags as we speak. Hope I can fix it.
And also, you might be able to see my suitcase on top of the book in the background. So yeah, I'm good to go as well.
We're packed and ready to go. I think I have to leave a little earlier than you because it's a longer flight to London from Malta than it is from Dublin. But I have to say, I'm very excited. I'm genuinely sort of buzzing about the prospect. I guess that's a combination of there's been no live poker for so long, and I'm just looking forward to a chunk of live poker. Of course, we played the IPO a couple of weeks ago, but this is a proper heavy-duty festival playing every day for a lot of days. And I suppose it's always just like at the start, you feel a little bit more optimistic. Dara, are you excited? Clearly not by
yes and no. In fact, at the start, I have to say my only feeling was one of just complete and utter dread, which slowly turned into trepidation, and now a bit of excitement has started to mix in. But for me, it's weird because, for as long as I've been playing poker, I've been taking 30, 40, 50, 60 flights a year. This is going to be my first flight in 20 months. And it's obviously a big one. We're going all the way across to Vegas. So it's just the whole process. I'm thinking, oh my God, I have to go to this again. And I haven't done it recently. So it just seems bigger in mind. Plus there's more, red tape around vaccination certificates and COVID tests and all this stuff. So yeah, the trip is definitely filling me with trepidation. I'm sure once I get there, I'll be very excited. I always am to get into Vegas. It's going to be kind of weird this year because I normally go towards the start of the series, and so I'm kind of in emotional sync with everybody else. Everybody gets there around the same time. Everybody's really happy to see everybody else. Everybody's really looking forward to the summer, given that it's normally in the summer. This time we are actually getting there late, very, very late, like just before the main. Already, most people are well past the initial bloom of optimism into, and even past the sort of grumpiness to outright hostility and just want to be out of here. And I do remember the first time you went to Vegas, you came across sort of at that period, and we all absolutely detested you, hated you for how chipper you suddenly were, and you actually had a good Vegas too, which kind of makes sense because if everybody's tilted and you're coming in completely fresh, I think it gives you an edge. But yeah, this time it's going to be us. We've already seen on Twitter that particularly the Americans are getting very touchy and not particularly looking forward to the arrival of the Euros. They've been complaining about us tanking, etc., etc. People like Alan Kessler getting involved even.
Oh, I do want to get to that later on. So thank you for bringing that up. We will talk a little bit about a piece I wrote this week actually about it, which I hope I struck the right balance on. But before I do that, I want to stick with this sort of theme because from the audience's perspective, they will probably know how we've actually gone in the main event, or if we're still going, in fact, in the main event, because by the time this show airs, that will have all happened. In fact, we'll probably be able to update you more so in the second half of this show when you continue to listen, because we will maybe be at day 4 or day 5, fingers crossed we'll be still going. Taking advantage though of the fact that we're still full of bloom and optimism, as you mentioned, it is fair to say that this is the period where you can kind of dream, and there's this sort of the air is filled with possibility. Dara, how much are you sort of looking forward to the campaign versus being hardened as a professional like you are? You've done a lot of different Vegases, you've done a lot of it different ways. You stayed in kind of hotels that are on the strip, you've stayed in houses, You've done the Gold Coast with me more recently. How do you feel about sort of that prospect? And by the way, I do share your trepidation. I did fly to Dublin for the IPO, and I did feel it very weird being on a plane again.
Yeah, it's kind of weird for me because, as I said, it's a mixture of trepidation and excitement now, and I kind of feel like those are both bad in different ways. You don't want to be too excited, and you don't want to be too. You basically want to be sort of emotionally neutral. I think the optimal thing would be to just turn your emotions off completely and just go in and treat it as a job of work that you have to do. It's very hard to do that with the WSOP main event. Now, every other year, it's been towards the end of the schedule for me. So, with the exception of one year where I had my big result, I've always kind of gone into the WSOP main event. Well, like, this is the one that can turn it around. Even a cash here will kind of save the series. But also kind of jaded and wanting it to be over, knowing that once the main event was over, that was it for me for this year for Vegas. This year, it's the first event we're playing, and in fact, we're coming in on day 2, which is also kind of that's a new departure for me. So yeah, I'm in my preparation. I've been sort of trying to focus on just, this is a tournament. This is all that it is, and prepare as well as possible for a tournament, give it my full focus, but try not to get too excited about it.
That seems like a good approach. Conversely to the optimism and the positivity, that feeling of busting the main event is gross. Most poker players refer to it as the worst day of the year. You can understand why. You have spoken about how it takes you roughly 12 minutes. The 12-minute rule Dara insists upon after a bust out, when he would rather not see any people. And if there's any people in his path, he may either run into them, run through them, or run away from them. Is it more than 12 minutes when you bust the main?
It is more than 12 minutes, but also it's very, very different. Usually in that 12 minutes in smaller tournaments, I just kind of turn it into this really nasty, entitled person who doesn't understand why he didn't win the tournament, and can see all these people who I believe are much worse players than me still in the tournament. So that's not somebody I ever want to expose to anybody. So I do kind of just try and disappear for the 12 minutes. It's a much different feeling, but busting the main event. And the only thing kind of close to it is when you bust the Irish Open. But even that's different now because the Irish Open is re-entry. So you just do it. You're just going again most of the time. WSOP main, it's just kind of like a really profound sadness. That's the only way I could describe it. Just a really profound sadness that descends on you, and you don't really want to talk to anybody. And it definitely takes more than the rest of the day to recover. I think most times I've even woken up the next day and it's still lingering, which is very unusual for me because usually sleep is a total reset. But it's just such a big deal. Like, it's the biggest tournament in the world. We're only going to get to play so many of them in our lifetime. And that's kind of it. Like the one that really sticks in my mind, which was obviously it's because it was the worst one. It's the time I had a biggest ever stack. I was up close to the chip leaders on day 3, I think it was, and I got aces in against jacks and lost, and the guy barely had me covered. So I kind of went literally in the space of one hand from thinking, or in the space of a minute from thinking, wow, if my aces hold here, I'm going to be maybe chip leader of the main event, to suddenly being out. And I remembered literally just wandering out through the Rio in a daze and not even knowing where I was going, and stopping in Starbucks and just sitting down there and trying to process what had just happened. And then another Irish guy who actually was coming out on a break saw me and he said, "Oh my God, I just read about your bust out. That was brutal." Which, kind of helped me get back into the real world and realize, well, this has happened and you're going to have to deal with it. Most of the years, it's just been a kind of like I say, a profound sadness. It's like, well, yeah, it's happened again this year.
Yeah, no, I know where you're coming from. We often talk about how tournament poker sort of dishes out more negative experiences than positive ones, but these positive ones do sort of compensate. They feel so much better than all the negative things, or at least our bodies or our minds or something makes us feel that way. Your most positive Vegas experience, you referred to it a moment ago, was your 2015 run in a 1500 event when you came second to Pesh de Silva. Obviously, you were in the hunt for a bracelet. It's fair to say that he was leading the charge on that final table. In fact, the fact that you came second was sort of tantamount to unbelievable cockroaching, because I think you might have been like 11 of 12, 8 of 9, 6 of 7 the whole way through, but you just refused to die. And then, of course, once you get heads up, you've got every opportunity. Can you tell us a bit more about that tournament?
Yeah, that was an interesting tournament because, like, I was talking earlier about how you want to be emotionally neutral going into a tournament. I definitely wasn't emotionally neutral going into that because I just came off finishing doing some commentary for the live stream on the seniors final table, and that sort of dragged on, and I had a cutoff point beyond which I wasn't going to enter this tournament, which was just a random 1,500 side event. And 20 minutes before my cutoff, all 9 players were still on the final table. So I thought, okay, well, this tournament's just not happening. And then they just literally went bang, 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 and the tournament was over just before my cutoff. So I jumped in, but it was kind of like a bit rushed. And then I was immediately regretting my decision because I was put on a late reg table with a bunch of other guys who had literally just jumped in at the last minute as well. And they were all beasts. And I was like, this is absolutely terrible. I've just burned money here. And I never really had a stack in that tournament. Like, it's not just that I was short at the end. I never really had a stack. I remember having to fold into the money. And I just remember, being 10 to 20 big blinds the whole way, taking the shove and reshove spots, getting the double ups when I needed, but never really feeling like something amazing is happening here. And even on the second last table, I was like a dog to make the final table. I was 17 of 18, 16 of 17, etc. And all the way through onto the final, all the way through to heads up, actually, I was either last in chips or second last in chips. Never got better than that. So it was easy in a sense that, like, obviously you know what you're doing in those spots, that you don't have too many tricky decisions. I also diverged quite a lot on the final table from what I would normally do because I was aware of the fact that there were some recreational players. It was a very polarized final table. There was Pesh, obviously, who I knew was a beast. There was Matt Dolan, who was a November 9er. And there was one other player who seemed to be very good. And there was Jason Kuhn, but he was very short. But the other players, they were as weak recreational players as you will ever find on a WSOP final table. And I kind of had the sense that they're all going to blow up, and they did all blow up one by one. So that sort of gave me an added incentive to play even tighter than ICM would suggest. So then I get heads up, and I think Pesh had like a 9-1 or 10-1 chip lead. He had a massive chip lead. He had just bulldozed through the final table and didn't expect it to last very long. But because of both of our styles, like even with the short stack, I was playing a fairly small ball style, and Pesh was playing a small ball style as well. So it did kind of drag on. It dragged on for an hour and a half to the end of play. And they said to us, okay, guys, you can go away on your break now and come back and play another hour, or you can go off for the night. And we were like, well, the stacks are still, like, Pesh still has a huge edge. And I think I was down to less than 20 big blinds now. So we said, okay, it'll probably be over in an hour, so we might as well finish it in an hour. Pesh went off on his break and came back and said he changed his mind, that he wanted it to go into the next day, which kind of surprised me, but I thought, okay, well, he's tired. That's fine. It has been a long day. Actually, what had happened was he talked to his backer, and his backer wanted to investigate the possibility of doing a deal. So we ended up, I was contacted by Rory Brown, who was part of that camp at the time. And Rory said, they want to do a deal. Can we meet tomorrow to discuss that? So by the time we came back, we had already agreed a deal to chop all the money. So we were essentially just playing for the bracelet. And it was such a big deal for me, I guess, the fact that I'd locked up 300K, that at the time I thought, okay, well, I'm still a massive dog. I think maybe I got it back to 6-1. But Pesh is still going to win this almost always. I think within 5 minutes of coming back, we got it in flipping. I had pocket twos and he had ace king, and I lost the cruelest way. I got counterfeited. But to be honest, it didn't really feel that bad at the time. I was like, okay, well, I was a long shot anyway. We did the deal, which locked up 300K for me. That's a big deal. My biggest ever score. It felt particularly good too, because I'd only had pretty much losing or break even Vegases till then, and this sort of wiped away all the losses in one fell swoop. Turned me into a fairly big lifetime winner in Vegas. So it felt really good in that, but there was a delayed after effect. About a year later, I was running in the park, And well, I should say first, when I came back from Ireland, the big question everybody asked me was not what was it like to win 300 grand. It was, what was it like to come so close to a bracelet? Like, you must be devastated. And I mean, I guess I kind of played along with it, and I was saying like, yeah, obviously I really wanted to win a bracelet, but I kind of really didn't believe it deep down, because of the combination of those two factors: the fact that I was such a dog anyway, that I never really felt I was in with a massive shot, and secondly, that we had chopped the money. But then about a year later, when I was getting ready for the next Vegas, I was running around the park on one of my long runs, and it kind of just hit me in a flash. It was like, oh my God, if I'd won that last flip, we were back to maybe 2-1, and then I have a legit shot. And that might be the only chance I get in my lifetime to win a bracelet. So yeah, I don't know what it was. Maybe it was a defense mechanism. Maybe my mind goes like, well, if you're going to feel sorry for yourself now after you come from Vegas, you're going to lose a few months of your life moping about the fact that you didn't win a flip, which is not a good mindset for a poker player to have. But yeah, I felt disappointed in retrospect, let's say.
Well, despite the fact that it didn't end in the ultimate success on the bracelet there, you are getting me in the mood here, Dara. I'm sort of, Vegas stories and bracelet stories are a great tantalizer, I think, ahead of going. And if it's possible, I'm even more looking forward to it, and even more excited, and even further away from that neutral place you told me that we need to get to. So like, hopefully
that's good. Yeah, I definitely want to get you out of the neutral place. Yeah, and that was a particularly exciting Vegas, because I think at least two other Irish players got heads up for bracelets. Seamus Cahill, Mark McDonald, I believe, and Andy Black also had a deep run. And actually, myself, Andy, and Seamus Cahill were more or less back to back. I went straight from my celebration dinner back to rail Andy on his final table, after he sent word that he wanted me to help him on ICM and stuff. And then I went, and then I remember going to bed that night feeling really, really tired Andy bust the next day on the final table, and going to bed after his celebration thing, really, really tired, thinking I'm going to catch up on my sleep, and then getting a call from Seamus Cahill saying, I'm heads up for a bracelet too, and I want to do a deal. Can you come down and advise me on how I should approach this? And we ended up staying up all night talking about that, and then going back to rail his heads up. So there was a 3 or 4 day period there where I was literally, either on a big final table myself getting heads up, or trying to advise or help, or help in any way I could other Irish players who were going well.
Even commentating on one the day before that again. Yeah. So yeah, no, you were right in the mix. It was an exciting time. Dara, preparation is massively important, and I suppose like execution at the World Series is so important that it sort of puts this onus on preparing to the nth degree ahead of time, and also having good sort of routines when you're there. In fairness, I think the healthiest I ever am is when I'm in Vegas with you, because you make sure I get out of bed early and run around a bit with you. Now, in fairness, you do usually you sort of patronize me for 3 or 4 laps to the car park, and then you fucking go into another gear, and I pant my way back to the hotel room for the first shower. But it is obviously very important to do your sims, do your study, get your game in good nick. But being fit, eating healthy, sleeping well, that's all massively important as well. One of the other kind of things is like where you stay and who you surround yourself with and what you do. And, this might come as a huge surprise to people that Dara has chosen to stay with me for 3 Vegases, or at least this one will be the 3rd one in a row. We stay in the Gold Coast, which is very much location, not exactly the snazziest place. I wouldn't recommend it to anyone from a sort of a fancy hotel point of view, but it's got some good food options in there. You can run around the car park, shaded 3 sides of it usually when you do it, which is important more in the summertime, admittedly. And then, of course, you're really close by, so you can avoid queues by regging the night before, just popping across the way, getting a coffee. Doing the registration thing takes 5 minutes instead of coming back the next morning when everyone's there and it takes 45 minutes. So I guess the question on a lot of people's lives is, why on earth you spend enough time with me, you content create with me, we meet twice a week virtually to create shows of different kinds. Why would you want to spend your Vegas with me too?
I think it's one of the great mysteries of life, even to me, to be honest, because there's a couple of misconceptions, I think, about maybe surrounding both of us. One is that I'm this incredibly patient person who can get on with anybody. That's completely not true. I've had friendships completely and utterly destroyed by just having to spend a few days in a hotel room with a person that I thought I really liked and thought I got on really well with. And then as soon as we're spending 24/7, I'm like, I just can't be doing this. This is terrible. I never want to see this person again. That's happened on more than one occasion with me. And the other misconception, I think, is that you are just impossible to be around at all times, which might have to do with your public persona or something. But the reality is, in terms of spending time with people from poker, you are by far the most fun person to be with, and actually the easiest as well, because you are I hate saying nice things about you, and I know you kind of hate when I do it as well. But
I'm worried about what's coming next.
You are actually
wreck my image.
Thoughtful friend in terms of like you're good at sort of dovetailing your mood. You do little favors, etc., etc. Not sexual, I should add.
Yeah, that's definitely going to give. If there's a way to cut this show, I'm going to try and cut that. You always come out to me for all the sort of vaguely suggestive things I say and verbs I use.
Yeah, I heard the words coming out of my mouth, and I knew before they even came out they were going to sound bad, but somehow I couldn't stop. Yeah, but it's actually great. I think people would be very shocked if they saw what we're like when we're completely alone and there's nobody else around.
Stop.
It's quite different. It's quite different from our public personas, and but we do have it. I think we both have a great time together. God, I really need to stop. It's
very. Yeah, I'll cut you off before you say something you regret there. No, but I have to say, somebody asked me in a podcast interview, I want to say it was like early this year, if they were making a movie about us, who would play us, and what would the movie be like? And I think I said, you're probably not going to like this, but I think I said something like, well, it's kind of be a bromance. It's like one of these stories of like two great friends, but it still has the story arc of a rom-com.
Yeah, no, I mean, that's very much it. I guess I always feel maybe the key to our relationship, apart from the fact that we have almost identical senses of humor and very, very close worldviews, it's kind of that we can resolve conflict really, really quickly and efficiently. Like we can literally scream at each other to the point that someone like Dara and David, if he's railing and is hiding under the bed crying, please stop fighting Daddy and Mammy. But
this actually, Dara's saying this like it's a hypothetical. This actually happened literally at the IPO 4 days ago.
IPO, yeah. But like
as Dara said, sometimes, very rarely, because he's right, we do share a worldview 98% of the time. But when we do find that 2% of a thing, we'll go have a tussle about it. And we did have one of those, and he was in the room, and he did literally hide under the bed, going, "I haven't seen anybody in a year and a half. Please stop shouting at each other."
Yeah, but it's just a really efficient way to deal with it, because we both get through it, and then we either agree or we agree to disagree, and we just move on. Whereas, I have other friends, you're getting the passive aggressive stuff a year later, and it's like, I can't be dealing with that. That's just nonsense. And that, I have no patience for that stuff. I just want it out and dealt with as quickly as possible, any conflicts that arise. And you're very good on that stuff. You don't hold back either.
Yeah, and I think it's just always good, and it's probably just good general advice for anyone out there, uncontroversial, I'm sure, is that it's just talk to each other. If you do have a little dispute, just have a conversation. A lot of people do want to get away from conflict, but actually meeting conflict head on is often the best way of dealing with things. And it's a very respectful way to deal with things, I think, as well, because, as you say, even if you realize, we've reached an impasse here, we're not going to agree, then you realize it, and you've kind of made every effort you can, and you respect each other for the fact that you tried. Now that we're on conflict, I know that you're painting me as more of a teddy bearish figure, and I know I like to bare my teeth once in a while. But I was trying to be very careful. You mentioned the piece I wrote that featured Alan Kessler. I was trying to make it like a historical piece. Please check it out, guys, if you haven't. It's on the VSO News feed there, basically about there being no such thing as a foreigner in Vegas, that it's the World Series. And it's like, yes, okay, most of the time we go to Vegas and we do it there, but if they're going to really be a World Series and claim to that notion, then they're just the kind of perennial host of a World Games, a bit like they get to host the Olympics every time, and nobody would call anyone a foreigner at the Olympics. It just doesn't seem like the right way to do it. Alan Kessler made this, I think, very indelicate tweet, probably a little bit insensitive tweet. I'm sure lots of people will go, snowflakes here. Now people getting upset about just a little word that he used. I think he used the phrase obvious. obvious foreigner. Yes, the F word, obvious foreigner. But yeah, I just thought it was worth picking up on. And yeah, I didn't want to throw Alan under the bus in any way, shape or form. I actually think Alan's a really good guy in poker, and I really enjoyed his company. We've really enjoyed having him on the show a couple of times, and I hope he'd come back even after this. But I was a bit disappointed, I suppose is probably the best way of describing it. And I kind of hoped that not only would he maybe realize that what he said wasn't great, but that all the sort of yahoos who jumped on it were like, yeah, fuck those foreigners, fuck those tanking, stalling Euro bastards, or whatever they said, might just like tone it down a bit and realize like, we're going over to America, probably for most of us, our first trip in 20 months. The lockdown's not been nice for anybody. We're dying for a bit of live poker. Guys are going to go out there. Maybe they've just forgotten their ranges, Dara. Maybe they're tanking because it's been so long. They've just forgotten, what they open and what they 3-bet with. I don't know. What do you think?
Yeah. Also, we're one thing that they should maybe bear in mind is that we're not as au fait with American recreational population tendencies as they might be. Like, they might know what it means when a farmer for Oregon 6X's under the gun, but we're kind of sitting there wondering what this actually means and how does that affect our range. And people might go, well, do you not know your pre-flop ranges? And I didn't pull that example out of thin air. That's an example actually given to me by Soheb, our good friend Soheb, who's also been on the show a few times. I thought it was a very good piece you wrote. I thought you tried a very good balance. I'm not sure how it will be received because, as I said, everybody's in a really tetchy, ready to blow at any moment. The people who are shouting snowflake are also the people who go off at the slightest accusation of xenophobia. I was a little bit worried when I saw the piece and I saw the image you were using to promote it of Alan Kessler in Bart Simpson mode writing and thing. I thought it might be an attack piece on Alan. I do like Alan a lot. I think Alan is a great guy. I know from what I've heard about Alan that he's very good at helping people who, when they need help, helping people who are not as fortunate as we are in life. So he's definitely one of the good guys. And I think, yeah, this is, I would put this down to a combination of just really not thinking about the implications of, why do you need to designate somebody as a foreigner, and just general tetchiness. I don't think it's been the best series for Alan. I could be wrong on that, but I haven't heard of him, winning any bracelets or making too many final tables. So I kind of give him a pass on that stuff too. I remember how tetchy I get. People do get really tetchy on the whole nationalistic thing. I mean, I know this from early in my career. I think maybe the second or third time I went there. Innocently on my blog just before I left, I wrote that it's been a bad series so far for the Irish. And it's been a very good series for the British because I think they had won a few bracelets, but hopefully that will change. And when I landed in Vegas to an absolute shitstorm where people were accusing me of being pro-British, anti-Irish. And I literally had to put out a statement of clarification at the behest of my sponsors, which seemed kind of ridiculous to me, given what all I had said was factually, it's been a good series so far for the British. It hasn't been a good series so far for the Irish, but people do get very wound up this time of year, I think.
That's amazing. I knew that had not landed as you had wanted, and I knew that you had sort of had to clarify. I didn't realize your sponsor had sort of said, Dara, put out a little statement there, will you?
Yeah, well, at the time,
tweet and sort of say, I don't love the Brits. I'm not after the Irish here.
Yeah, this was it. Like, yeah, I don't love the Brits. I do think the Irish are all great players. I'm in no way suggesting that the Irish are worse players than the British. It's just we haven't run very well this series. Yeah, I mean, at the time my sponsors were Bruce Poker, who were an exclusively Irish operation. So being seen as anyway anti-Irish was just a very bad thing. And yeah, it was a salutary lesson to me on how you have to sort of not just think about what you're actually saying, but think about how it might be perceived.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, look, final note I would say is that if you do encounter gratuitous tanking and you do encounter angle shooting and bad play, absolutely call it out. Like that's the one aspect of this I had no problem with. I think calling out a person for poor behavior, something nasty that they said, some kind of like slightly squirmy, not so nice, wormy kind of behavior at the table, I'm not into it either. But just don't go, oh, where are they from? Europe. Oh, fucking Euros. It's just, it doesn't apply. Like, even if 99% of people are, classic fitting the stereotype of their country or whatever it is, it's not good to kind of ascribe a quality like that onto somebody regardless. You know, like you could be meeting the one person who isn't, and it's just a bad policy in general. And it is a slippery slope from there into xenophobia and racism and horrible things. So I suppose, even though it's a very small thing, and I don't think it was a bit of a storm in the teacup, really, I just kind of thought, I might just say something about this, because even if people read it and go, you know, a little bit reflective on it, they might just avoid you know, attacking me when I undoubtedly stall into the money in a week's time and something.
Yeah, I find it quite ironic that you were the one going to war on this, given that you are one of the more egregious.
Fake tanker, Dara. Fake tanker.
A fake tanker, yeah, as the French guy called you. The other thing I would say on this is, even the term Euros or foreigners, it's just far too broad. Like we probably are closer culturally to Americans than we are to Spaniards, I would say. You know, we share a language, we share a lot of cultural attitudes, we consume a lot of the same media and stuff. So just Euro is just far too broad a term. Like the Spanish are very different from the Germans, the French are very different again, etc., etc. So like I don't even think you can generalize almost anything about all Euros, apart from the fact that they live in Europe. It's just far too broad. We're separated by language, culture, and lots of other things as well. But yeah, absolutely, call out bad behavior. And I personally hope that the side effect of this will be that as soon as you start stalling on bubbles, people immediately start calling clock.
Very good. Well, look, on that note, I don't know about you, Dara, but I think I'm just checking my watch here. I think I'm actually going to the airport in about 3 hours. You probably have about 5 hours before you to get there. So I guess see you in Heathrow.
Yeah, see you in Heathrow, unless something horrible goes wrong with the mountain of documentation we have to get through. I'm definitely not going to sleep before the plane now. So yeah, I might be a bit bleary-eyed when you see me.
Yeah, this is our attempt to quash the jet lag, is to get ourselves to Heathrow and then sleep on that journey. So hopefully that works out for us. We will see you guys in Vegas. Cue the magical transition to us being there now. Whoa.
We'll film our plane landing. Definitely won't be stock footage.
How you doing, guys? We are back after what I imagine was a very nice bit of footage there. Did you take that footage, Tara?
Yeah, I shot it. You were sleeping at the time, so
yeah.
It felt to me. I think you were going to do it originally, but I thought, well, you're sleeping, so you're not going to be able to do it. We obviously both travel with state-of-the-art camera work.
Exactly, and there's no way that was stock footage taken from some random person's YouTube channel.
That's
so we
would vicious rumor.
We would never do that. We've never done that to any poker establishment, nor would we do it to some random person either. Anyway, we have made it to Vegas. This is the dream. This is Vegas, right behind us here.
This is the dream sequence from Twin Peaks, where the dwarf is going to come through those curtains. This is very, very good. This is a new low in lock-in history.
This is... Yeah, I suppose we okay. So behind, if you can imagine it, there are two beds and a bedroom here, but we decided to put ourselves together. Actually, don't imagine anything after all the innuendos Dara used. We have to kind of be careful earlier in the show. Anyway, guys, we did make it finally. It was a fucking tough day. 28 hours for me door to door. I think we were 25, 26 hours door to door. We had a delay in San Francisco along the way, so it was the longest day ever. But we made it. We got a reasonably good night's sleep, all things considering, and then we headed in to play our main event. We're going to talk about that in a little while, but actually we won't talk about it immediately because there was a bit of news around that time. We had the PPC happening just around the time when we were traveling, and Jungleman managed to win the PPC, which was a phenomenal result for him. He managed to beat Ryan Leng heads up. He referred to himself as a wild, uncaged animal, and he couldn't be put down. And he kind of couldn't be put down. There was one very strange hand, three-handed, where Ryan Leng sort of slow played an ace blind v blind when Jungleman was down to 3 bets, and basically kind of leveled himself into folding the river when Jungleman value-towned a good king, and he didn't call it off with top pair. He was good, and for half a bet he surrendered quite a chunky pot to Jungleman in that spot, doubled him up more or less, and then Jungleman went on to beat both Volpe and Leng. I know Leng was gutted. One of the things he said actually was, hang on, let me check my notes because I have to. Dara, look, I'm using your phone. See, we don't have the usual standards. So
I have to keep waving that thing around.
I have to keep waving it around. So Leng said very honestly, very kind of matter of fact, kind of owning it all. He took to Twitter. He said, to the people saying it was almost the worst fold in the history of poker, I completely agree with you. Saying it was bad is an understatement. It was atrocious, abysmal, absolutely horrendous. Bottom line, he went on to say, so what lessons can we learn from my mistake? For one, let's take ownership of our mistakes. I speak with a lot of poker players who make every excuse that they possibly can before they own up to the fact that they could have done better. Stop it. I made a terrible fold. I am to blame, not Jungle, not anyone else. Very honest, really, from him there, Dara. And it sort of made me think about different students I had years ago when I was coaching, and I know you do an awful lot of coaching now, and sort of the ways in which people react to poor play on their part, and whether they sort of own it or whether they sort of deflect it.
Yeah, I think one of the big attributes you need in poker is to be able to detach your emotions from every situation. That's obviously very important at the table when you're trying to execute your strategy, not to get emotionally involved in the outcomes. But it's also important in how you process your mistakes when they do occur. And it is a sort of a hallmark of all the top class players that I have coached, which kind of separates them from other players, is that they not only do they kind of own their mistakes, they actually actively go looking for them. Even if they think something isn't a mistake, they'll bring the hand and they'll say, is this a mistake? And they won't get upset if you tell them that it is. They'll actually be quite relieved. They'll because I always say to people, like, you should be looking for mistakes, because if you bring a hand to somebody and they say you played it perfectly, you learn nothing, and you wasted both their times, frankly. But if you bring a hand and there is a mistake and there's a learning point, then that's something you can improve on in the future. And your return from poker long term will be fixing all these leaks. Every time you find a leak and you fix it, your future expectation increases. If you go through a year and you don't discover any errors, or believe you don't, and you still have a bad year, that's pretty grim, because there's nothing to suggest the results will get better next year. But if you discover a couple of leaks, then your results should improve.
Yeah, well said. And I think, a lot can be learned from Ryan's bit of introspection there. It's something that I think a lot of the best players do have, but it's never been quite put so succinctly in that little 10-tweet thread he put together, sort of a few paragraphs. Anyway, PC was done and dusted. It ended up having 63 runners, some of whom, including Jungleman, came in directly to day 2. I know that created a bit of a stir. We'll talk about that in a second. But it created about a 3 million prize pool, which Jungleman got nearly $1 million of. I think he got like 950k. Very good result, obviously. And he gets his name etched on the Chip Reese trophy. He gets his first bracelet. He never won a bracelet before. He actually had very few World Series cash before, because he's just grinding the cash when he's here. But Ryan Leng, kind of an incredible story from him. He sort of took up mixed games about 6 months ago, I hear. Got quite good at them, obviously. Managed to win a bracelet, managed to get heads up in another spot earlier in the series, all in mixed game and limit game type stuff. And then his friends were sort of, oh, you got to play the 50k, and he's like, no, I'm not playing the 50k, that's a bit ridiculous. But he sold for it, got in there and came second, and could have won in a lot of other worlds. So incredible stuff from him. Moving on, I am conscious we did arrive to a bit of controversy. Mike Matasow sort of blew up on Twitter, giving out about the fact that players are allowed, both register into day 2 of the PPC, which Jungleman did, but also register quite deep into day 2 levels into day 2 of the main event. You can jump in, I suppose that effectively means you can jump in 14 hours and 1 minute into the tournament, which is quite a ways along. Probably gets you into the tournament maybe 8 hours from the money, which is still a long way, but it is, quite far in. You'd be buying 50 bigs at that point, and you'd have to navigate those 50 bigs.
I think it's more than 8 hours. It's about 12 hours. Presumably.
Is it about 12 hours?
Six. You still have 6 hours on day 2.
You're right, actually. Yeah, it is a little bit long. Yeah, sorry, more like 10 to 12 for sure. Actually, Dara's right on that one. But still, it's almost like less than half the time you would have to survive if you start at the beginning. But of course, you're buying a much shallower stack. Your opportunity to gobble up some of that very dead-ish money on day 1 is taken away from you. But, there are certain ICM advantages too. Now, the World Series have obviously gone this way. They've thought that's a good way to get people into the event who might just want to come in a bit maybe later. Maybe some of the high rollers don't really want to get in right at the beginning. So they're keen to take the late reg approach as well. online has gone this way. Most other live tours will have 6, 7, 8 levels of late reg as standard as well. So should the WSOP be any different, as I get the question, or should the WSOP main event be any different? Is it kind of a special one that should sort of maybe only allow for a couple of levels of late reg, but not really generate that ICM advantage that people would have coming in late?
Yeah, I mean, I think, well, first of all, I was kind of annoyed when this became the big story of the day, because what everybody was talking about last week was the fact when the Europeans arrived, we'd all be tanking, and I expected you to become the major focal point of all the American hate for that. Unfortunately, I somehow seem to be lumbered with the tag of Mr. Late Register just because I wrote about it in the book. This book here, incidentally, Endgame Poker Strategy.
Fantastic book.
And I mean, the fact that I wrote about it doesn't mean that I necessarily think it's a good idea from the point of view of the overall ecosystem. All we've done in the book is we've explained very clearly what the advantages are and exactly how much it roughly is in most situations. And I kind of feel it was important to do that for recreations, because most recreations thought it was a disadvantage to late register and wouldn't actually do it for that, and they thought it was that it was bad. Whereas the reality is, apart altogether from the ICM benefit that you get from registering late, which again we went into in the book, there's also some benefit just for the recreations of playing shallower against the pros. If you go in 300 big blinds deep and there's a bunch of pros at your table, you're likely to get slaughtered very, very quickly. And on the other hand, if you go in with 75 bigs or 50 bigs, their edge over you won't be as great. And you'll know how to play that, because in most of the tournaments the recreational players play, that's kind of the stack depths that they get used to. So I was asked a few years ago to recommend people who qualified for the PSPCA, being given free tickets as such, what advice I would give them. And the major piece of advice I gave to them was max late reg, not so much for the ICM benefit, but just for the sort of like stay out of the waters with 300 big blinds when the sharks are in there.
And I believe after getting that fantastic advice, almost none of them did it.
Correct. One guy managed to last halfway through level 2 before he jumped in, but pretty much everybody else, yeah. Which, I mean, that's fair enough too. It's part of the recreation experience of like having a nice long slow structure, and I completely understand that.
Yeah.
So given that most recreations do want to come in early, I do feel that there's some onus on organisers not to take the piss on this and let people register too late. Now, online for a while was absolutely ridiculous. Where I remember once registering into the money in an online tournament. But even when that was an outlier, but even in a lot of cases, you're just very, very close to the money, and it becomes such a huge advantage. Like poker's a zero-sum game. That money doesn't come from nowhere. That money comes from the people who registered at the start. So they're at a disadvantage. And if they're the recreational players, you're kind of doubling up the disadvantage on them. So what I would say is there's some onus on organisers to stop that. You obviously have to have some late reg, because not everybody can get there on time or whatever. But there is a balance to be struck there. The second point is, if you are a recreational player, at least understand that you're putting yourself at a disadvantage by going at the beginning. Now, if you're willing to do that because you want the experience of the whole tournament, that's fine. But again, if you buy this book here, we do explain why you're at a disadvantage.
Yeah, we were trying to do some sort of guerrilla maths on this one and figure out, well, what is the ICM edge if you were to last minute this? If you go in right at the last minute of the main event, you're roughly arriving with half the field remaining. Now, you have to get to the top 15% of the field, so you've still got a ways to go, but obviously, you've made it quite far. And we sort of, I think, figured that it probably meant that you had roughly 15% equity. You probably had increased the value of your 10k buy-in to maybe 11.50, something like that, or 11.5.
Yeah, I have a piece coming out in Poker News. It might be out by the time that this goes to air, which gives a few specific examples, and it is sort of in the 15 to 25% region typically. I would say as well that it can't be calculated exactly. We're making estimates because ICM is a very complicated calculation. Once you go up above 20 people, it just can't be done even by computers. but we can certainly estimate it based on sort of the trends of smaller fields. And 15 to 25, 30%, that's kind of the range, which basically means that if somebody comes in at the last minute, and let's say it's a 25% edge, they're getting 2,500 in free equity.
And I was saying to you, Dara, well, like, let's compare that, admittedly small enough sample size, but maybe, if you were to universalize this, what would be your average finishing stack? You start with 60k, main event day one, you start from the beginning, you gobble up some of that lovely value, lovely soft money that's out there. Are you going to finish with 75k, 80k, 100k on average? Obviously, you've bust day one a couple of times. You've almost always made it to day two.
No,
made day three sometimes.
I bust once.
Once, sorry, apologies. I thought it was twice. But so like when you factor in those things, obviously the time that you bust day one, it has a huge effect to the overall because it's quite devastating.
Yeah.
But when you do manage to kind of like coast through day one with the 100k a lot, well, that's obviously a lot better than starting with 60.
Yeah, for sure. My rough estimate, again, back of the envelope, is that on average, when I play a day one at the WSOP, I increase my stack by 50%. Now, that doesn't increase my equity by 50%, which is worth noting. And it also depends on the distribution. Like, if that's a case that I'm increasing my stack by, let's say, 55%, 9 years, and then in the 10th year I'm busting, that drags the bust is a lot more costly. So that sort of drags the dollar value down. But yeah, it that's roughly what it feels like a day one. So if you do add, let's say, 40% to your equity, I mean, that's better than the 20 to 25% we're estimating for the ICM. So you're still better off playing the day one. And we would have played the day one had we got here in time. We literally traveled the day of the travel restrictions, and our only two options were either to play the last day 1F,
full of sharks,
literally full of sharks, probably most of the people we were on the plane with, or to come into day two, which is being played at the same time,
full of fish,
full of fun players who had played the earlier flights before the travel restrictions were lifted. Another huge factor was if we played the last day 1F and got through, we would have had about 11 hours sleep before we have to go and play our day two. And if we get through that, we have no break. Next day we're back for day three. And if we go deep in the tournament, that sort of having done that straight off the plane with no recovery from jet lag could be quite costly later on. The way we did it, we came in, we got into day two, we both got through.
We were exhausted for the last level, so it is worth noting that the jet lag, we were sending messages back and forth to each other for the last level going, I'm fading here, what about you? I had a Red Bull for the first time in 10 years. Dara was like, don't do it, Dave, you'll crash, it'll be bad. I was like, the coffee is swilling here, I can't go. That's my one bugbear. We're drinking Starbucks like it's fucking the best coffee in the world, because it's literally the best you can get in this poxy city. The coffee is terrible in Vegas. But yeah, I couldn't do the coffee, so I was like, I have to do something that's going to perk me up. And I did do a cheeky Red Bull, which I find disgusting, and it's probably sweating out of my pores still the next day.
There goes our Red Bull deal.
Sorry, Red Bull, yeah.
Brain Fuel already passed us over, so...
Yeah, Brain Fuel apparently would have more evenly distributed my caffeine spike and given me arterial fibrillations like Helmut suffered. I would have gone full pyromaniac in that last level. High on Brain Fuel. But seriously, I was really struggling the last 2 hours, and I know you were too, and it was great to think, oh well, at the end of this we can go for a little meal, we can try and keep ourselves up another hour or so, and we can get a great night's sleep, not worry about the next day, have a sort of a day off, and then go back in pretty much all sorted out now and rested. And as you say, if you do make it to day 4 or 5 or beyond in this event, that'll stand to us, I think.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, day off is it needs to be qualified. This is part of our day off, and we have other stuff that we're doing, besides recording this grimy.
This beautiful textured extra bit of the lock-in, yeah.
Yeah. Less said about this, the better. But I think we definitely made the right choice there. Softer field, and a bunch of our friends came over and took the other option, 1F, and they all seem to have bagged up tiny stacks or bust. So from a purely results-based point of view, we're feeling quite smug as well.
Yeah, well, we both managed to get through, which is great. And obviously, once you get into day 3, you are sort of like eyeing up the bubble. It's a good way off. I think it probably goes just after dinner, or you might get lucky, it goes just before dinner, but it always tends to be around there. And that's 6 hours of play. That's, I don't know, maybe at the rate they play poker here, that's probably 150 hands. They play quite quickly here in America. In fairness, there is a
really
good pace
quickly,
at the table, so might even be more than 150, might be 180 hands away. So it's not like you can, just like lock up too soon. You'll certainly be an hour out. You'll be thinking, okay, maybe slow down a bit here, maybe lower variance, maybe limp or play passive lines, or reduce bet sizes, that type of thing that you can do to lower variance. But it won't be the case of doing that right out of the gate. Dara, you're coming back to, I want to say, just under 20 bigs.
I think it'll be 16. Yeah, I'm not actually sure what the level is, 2400 or 2500, but I have 40k, so it's going to be in that region. Yeah.
Yeah, and the beauty of this event is 2 hour clock. It's extraordinary. If Dara gets his double up any time in the first half hour, gets himself back to 25 to 30 bigs plus. That's a stack you can just kind of navigate this tournament with. 2 hour levels, just really slow, doesn't put a huge amount of pressure on you.
Yeah, I mean, it's a real testament to this tournament that most of the times I've bust, it's literally been the first time I've been all in and called in the World Series main event, and often that's day 2, day 3. It's very rare for me to be all in on day 1 and called. Yesterday I was all in a couple of times but never called, so I'm actually going into day 3 still with that sort of like, I haven't been all in and called yet. And that is a real testament structure. It's by far the best structure in the world. I mean, there's nothing else like it, and it's that sort of, I guess, is one of the reasons as well why people are focusing on the late reg, and I completely understand that, because that does undermine it slightly, that people are sort of, you force people to play. Well, you don't force them. People do play for 10 hours on day 1, go off and back up, and then a bunch of guys just breeze in, and so few people get eliminated on day 1 too, that like even the average, the average I think coming back to day 2 was 90k.
Yeah.
We came in with 60k, so we weren't even short. We had 75 big blinds.
Yeah. And we ran very well in that first level. You were up to over 90k in the first level. I was up over 100 in the first level. So then you immediately think, oh my God, I've saved a whole day in my life and it's great. But no, fair point. Should it be allowed? I don't know. But the fact that it is allowed, we availed of it. I have to say, this is a hand that has to be mentioned. Dara O'Kearney, when you look through the bust out sort of updates on the Poker News or the WSOP app, at least a quarter of them, maybe even a third of them, are like, so-and-so player ran kings into aces, boo-hoo, good luck him, cool, or what can you do? That should have happened to you, but your spidey senses tingled. We have an example. It's a very rare thing in poker, guys. We have an example of a pre-flop, not satellite, kings fold in a tournament where you weren't even that deep. Tell us what happened.
Yeah, basically I raised under the gun, and it was still fairly early, so I guess I had 60 to 70 big blinds, something like that. Raised under the gun, got 3-bet by my neighbour, who was a very, very active German, and
so we're not believing him. We're actually delighted with our kings.
We're already thinking our kings are really good here. Comes around to the big blind, who was an American recreational player, and he was playing very loose. He was playing most pots, and he was turning up with stuff like 9-8 off, suit under the gun, but he was doing almost no 3-betting, and I certainly hadn't seen him 4-bet yet. And he looked at his cards and he immediately started shaking. Like, he started shaking to the point that the last time we were in that room in the Rio, there was an earthquake. I thought, is this another earthquake? He's visibly shaking, which, that's a fairly well-known excitement tell. So I was already going, oh God, I really don't feel good about this now at all.
So he was at the 4-bet.
So yeah, he took a while to gather himself and assemble the chips to put out the 4-bet. And I still had the German behind me as well, who gets dealt the same number of big hands as everybody else, and the 4-bet is like pretty much committing me. So I was like, I mean, do I stick it in here and just assume it's not always aces?
Yeah, like, is it if it's queens and it's ace king, then it's okay, but if it's not, if it's kings and aces, then and you have kings, and
given it that it was that structure as well, I just thought, well, I'll just pretend I don't have kings here. I'll pretend I've got something else.
It was a 6-7 suited. I was chancing my arm.
So I did decide to fold, and the German called. He was deeper against the other guy, so he could call more hands, obviously. And the flop came queen X, I think, and they got it in. The guy had aces, like I thought he did, and the other guy had
amazing
jacks.
read.
But yeah, I think it was literally maybe the only tournament in the world where I could possibly do that. It's a combination of two things. First of all, just the structure is so good that you don't have to sort of like just go with your hand.
It's an extraordinary read though. Like, guys, I'm sure you're all thinking the same thing, is that it's all very well to have pieced it together like he does, but when you're looking at the kings, you just kind of go, oh well, sometimes it's my time to die, I just have to do it anyway. You found that discipline, as you said, you know, knowing that it's a great structure, feeling like this is definitely a dark tunnely spot where the guy has only got premium hands, and you know, you have the premium hands, you know, as well, so the most likely one is the other one. And
yeah, and obviously if he had ace king and the other guy had jacks and I would have won, we'd never have heard of this hand. So.
No, we wouldn't be talking about this. Dara would never have got into the box going, guess what I did. Yeah. But it is that is a truly extraordinary hand, I have to say. So you know, you're sort of, what's the phrase, living on borrowed time or living by your wits, or spidey senses sort of came to the rescue there. Incredible stuff. But you know, bagging up 40k, short stack specialist in many ways. I've no doubt that you could.
Yeah, well, as I said, like I was all in a few times but never called, so I did actually move from 20 back up to 40 near at the end. So even though it was, you know, disappointing day overall, you're never happy when you played for a whole day and lost a third of your stack. It still felt okay. Like I wasn't, when I was down to 20, it was starting to feel like desperation time. But yeah, I mean, it's a playable stack, and as you said, like, we're not that far from the bubble, and that has another advantage too. Taylor draw is going to be very important for me. Obviously, pretty much everybody's going to cover me, but there's a huge difference between somebody having 100,000 covering me and somebody having 400,000. If I shove into a 400k stack, you know, he can call off, and it's not even a flesh wound if he loses. But the 100k stack is thinking about getting through the bubble himself, so he doesn't necessarily want to be all in even for 40k.
Absolutely. Well, we are very much looking forward to playing our day 3, which is our day 2.
Let's talk about you, David. You bagged up quite a large stack.
I just had one of those kind of days where nothing went wrong. It was just like the perfect poker day, I gotta be honest. I don't think I was put in too many tough spots. I think I just like had really strong ranges of hands all the time. I seemed to just pit people and get value. I wouldn't take too much credit. I was obviously start with 60k, bagged up 270. If people were following my Twitter updates, which I did at every break, it was just sort of every break I had another 50k, and it just kind of went that way. Don't want to claim much credit for amazing play or some crazy bluff or anything, because I really didn't. I played very few big pots. It was a very low variance small pot way, kind of what you dream about, and just was able to keep myself out of trouble. The one significant pot I lost, impossible to get away from. Very loose guy opens, I 3-bet him, and then there's a cold 4-bet shove from a guy with 28 bigs. I'd already put 8 bigs in, and I had ace king suited, so I was happy enough to call off his stack, and he had aces, so his aces held, and that was the one sort of setback I had. But the rest of the time it was kind of a case of flopping some sets, which was nice, and guys willing to pay when I did, and just making the best hand. Probably bluffed a few little spots, but nothing crazy. So, you know, delighted obviously that it all worked out. 270k is fantastic. It does put me in a spot where, you know, if the first couple of hours go well tomorrow, I can then be the guy maybe at the table who's pushing people around on the bubble, which is nice when you're the one with the gun. Not so nice when the rabbit has the gun. So we'll hopefully get ourselves into that spot tomorrow. But also a lot can go wrong, and I'm very aware of that, and I'm going in kind of steady. And Dara's a great man to have in your ear, going like, "Don't you be getting fucking carried away, lapping."
The story I always remember is I was at an FPS French poker series in Lille once, and I was staying with Smidge. And we both played the high roller, which might have been a 3k or something like that, and it was a 2-day event. Smidge bust. I actually bagged up the chip lead, so I was 1 of 17 coming back with I think 14 or 15 getting paid, and off I went to the casino, and I told Smidge. Smidge said he was just going to have a shower and some cornflakes, and then he'd be long for the rail. And before he was finished his shower and his cornflakes, I was back in the room explaining to him that I'd busted 16th. All standard spots, but yeah, you can literally just go bang, 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 because you know, you mentioned you're covering people, and that's great, but that also does mean the kind of spot that you talked about, where you know you've raised with ace king and somebody shoves aces and you have to call off. That can happen. That
happens 3 times.
That happens 3 or 4 times, and suddenly you're out the door. So yeah, fingers crossed for you tomorrow. I think you're in an amazing spot, and I think this is one tournament where it's really good to have a stack at this point. People are definitely going to overfold just to try to get into the money.
Yeah, so look, guys out there, please wish us luck. We're loving all the interaction on social media. Dara and my phone just take turns pinging. Obviously, buy the book.
Buy the book. We are into the end game of the World Series main event now, so today is the day to basically buy this book and read it. And I'll be walking around the Rio all day long at Barry Carter's behest, because as far as Barry's concerned, I'm not here to play poker. I'm just here to sell books.
It's so true. Every second message Dara gets is Barry going, got another little job for you today, Dara. You have to go and do this little bit of media. Don't forget to mention the book.
Yeah, and he keeps on to me. We literally just landed on it, and I tweeted, we spent 26 hours traveling or whatever, and his response was, "How many books have you sold so far?"
Well, that answer,
fuck off, Barry.
that answer is quite a few. I've seen them. I keep 2 in my bag at all times, because Dara sometimes when he goes, "Okay, I've sold all mine. Do you still have your 2? Get over to table 276 and give a book to so and so." So and we've managed to shout out here. I think genuine shout out, a Coloradan fan. We're walking back from the
shout out to Megan from Colorado.
Yeah, coming from the Rio yesterday. We're doing our walk across the road. It's a big sort of motorway, or we call it a motorway now. It's probably just a small road here.
Yeah, I saw this lady coming up behind us, and she was looking at us kind of like, there's something dodgy about these two guys. It's just completely understandable, like two Irish guys just walking through the car park at 1 a.m. That's not really what you want to see. But I'll let you tell the rest of the story.
Well, she sort of overtook us on the left-hand side, and then sort of glanced back at us and goes, "Are you the podcast guys?" We were like, I think we are, yeah, probably that we are. And she's like, yeah, I listened to your show. And we're like, where are you from? And what are you? Anyway, she told us she's from Colorado. So shout out the chip race fans in Colorado, or at least fan. Yeah. We have one fan in Colorado. But we appreciate that. And actually, when people do come up to us, which does happen quite a bit here, because I guess it is that big celebration of poker. And we have a lot of American audience. I think about 1/3 to 40% of our audience is American, even though we're not American. And, the show has a lot of European and UK and whatnot guests on it. It is clearly sort of.
We love our American fans.
We love our American fans. And I'm sorry about that comment about your coffee being terrible. It's true, but I shouldn't have said it, because I should just be trying to be in the mood and celebrate. Look, guys, thank you so much. We really appreciate all the support. Wish us luck in the main event. Hopefully, we will be doing another one of these in like 4 days' time, when we're both in day 7 or 8. That would be nice. But
much more likely we'll be broken men by then.
We'll be broken men who are in the 888 third flight re-entry, second bullet. But
6 bigs.
Exactly. But look, guys, really appreciate it. Hope you've enjoyed the show. A little bit from Dublin, a little bit from Malta, and now a little bit from, I swear it is, the Rio. Look, it's out there. That's Vegas out there, guys. That's it out there. Take care.
Ciao.